May 19, 2018, Windsor Castle, the most watched royal wedding in a generation. 60,000 people lining the streets, 2 billion watching on television around the world. A gospel choir, a preacher who talked about love in a way that made the entire royal family look slightly startled. A bride in a Givenchy gown who walked herself halfway down the aisle before her new father-in-law met her and took her the rest of the way. It looked like a fairy tale, it felt like a fairy tale, and for most of the people watching, for the most of the 2 billion, it was a fairy tale. But Tom Bower has spent years talking to the people who were in the rooms that the cameras did not enter, the people who were at the dinners before the wedding, the meetings after, the arguments nobody was supposed to know about, the decisions made quietly without press releases that shaped everything that followed the fairy tale ending. And what he found, across 2 books, dozens of sources, and years of research, is a story that looks very different from the inside than it did from the street. Here are 10 of the most explosive things Tom Bower says were happening beneath the fairy tale surface, starting from before the wedding and going all the way to what is happening right now. And I promise you that by the time we get to number 1, you will understand why Bower called his new book not revenge, but betrayal. But before we get into it, if you want this kind of deep, documented, carefully sourced breakdown every week, subscribe right now. One tap, I will be here. Truth number 10. William warned Harry before the engagement that it was all moving too fast. This is one of the first things Bower establishes in Betrayal, and it sets the tone for everything that follows. According to Bower's account, before Harry had even proposed, when the relationship was still relatively new and the world was still mostly unaware of who Meghan Markle was, William sat his brother down and told him directly that he was concerned, that the relationship was progressing too quickly, that Harry needed to slow down and be sure. Harry did not slow down, he proposed, and Bower claims that William's concern, expressed privately, brotherly, not hostile, was the first crack in what would eventually become one of the most public and painful royal rifts in modern history. Now, here's what makes this detail significant beyond the obvious family drama angle, because it tells you something about the speed of the relationship that became the wedding, that became the fairy tale. Harry and Meghan met in 2016. They were engaged by November 2017. They married in May 2018. 18 months from introduction to Windsor Castle. For anyone, that is fast. For a member of the royal family, whose relationships are subject to levels of scrutiny that would test any connection, it is extraordinarily fast. William reportedly saw that, and said so, and was not listened to. Truth number 9. Catherine shared William's concerns, but for specific reasons that Bower makes explicit. According to the book, both William and Catherine were skeptical of Meghan from the very beginning of the relationship, but Bower goes further than simply noting the skepticism. He says it was rooted in a specific concern about Harry's emotional state in the period before he met Meghan. Both William and Catherine, according to Bower's sources, believed that Harry had gone through a seriously troubled period after the death of his mother, a period involving alcohol, drugs, therapy, and a series of unstable relationships. They were worried, Bower claims, that Harry was still in a fragile place and that the speed with which he was committing to this particular relationship was a product of that fragility rather than a sign of genuine readiness. Whether that assessment was correct or fair is genuinely impossible to know from the outside. Harry himself has spoken extensively about the decade of grief he experienced after Diana's death. He has talked about therapy, he has talked about the dark period, he has not hidden that he was struggling. But the specific claim that William and Catherine's skepticism about Meghan was not rooted in hostility toward her, but in concern about Harry's emotional state, changes the shape of the pre-wedding tension considerably. It suggests a brother trying to protect rather than obstruct, and it makes what came after feel even more painful. Truth number 8. Meghan allegedly arrived uninvited at Kerry Washington's birthday party during a Netflix event. According to Bower's account of a 2025 Netflix preview event, Meghan appeared at Kerry Washington's birthday celebration, and according to his sources, she had not been invited. Her team has not confirmed or denied this specific claim. Kerry Washington has not commented on it publicly, and Bauer presents it as one example of a broader pattern he alleges throughout the book, that Meghan's public appearances and social engagements are driven by a relentless need to be present, to be visible, to be at the center of things, even when the invitation has not come.
Whether that characterization is fair is genuinely contested. Kerry Washington and Meghan have appeared warm in public, and the specific claim of arriving uninvited is the kind of allegation that is very hard to verify from the outside and very easy to weaponize. But it sits inside a specific chapter of Bauer's argument about Meghan's Hollywood relationships and the gap between the warmth shown publicly and the reality of those relationships behind closed doors. Truth number 4. The Los Angeles wildfires visit was filmed and the footage was shared on Instagram. In January 2025, devastating wildfires tore through the Los Angeles area. Communities were destroyed, people lost everything, and Harry and Meghan, who live in Montecito, close enough to be affected by the wider disaster, visited fire victims through their Archwell organization. Bauer's account of this visit focuses not on the visit itself, but on what was alleged to have led to it. According to the book, following criticism of the couple in the media during that period, their advisors suggested visiting the wildfire victims as a strategic move. The couple went, they filmed the interactions, and they shared the footage on Meghan's Instagram. A filmmaker named Justine Bateman publicly described the visit as a publicity stunt and called them disaster tourists. Now, the defense of this is real and worth hearing. Many public figures visit disaster zones. Many charities document their work for fundraising and awareness purposes. Sharing footage of community engagement is standard practice for organizations trying to demonstrate their impact. None of that is inherently wrong. But the specific claim that the visit was suggested by advisors following media criticism rather than being initiated by genuine, spontaneous compassion sits uncomfortably alongside the broader Bauer argument about Meghan's public presentation and her private motivations. Harry and Meghan's team described their response to the wildfires as immediate, personal, and entirely genuine. Truth number 3. At the Invictus Games, organizers were reportedly told to call Meghan ma'am and Harry sir. The Invictus Games are Harry's project, founded by him, built around his military experience and his commitment to wounded veterans. They are, by most accounts, the thing Harry has done in his post-royal life that is most genuinely his own, most connected to who he actually is, rather than who the brand needs him to be. And according to Bauer, at the Invictus Games in Vancouver, the chief executive Nick Booth, who had replaced 2 earlier executives, reportedly dismissed after objecting to the couple's security and travel expenses, gave organizers specific instructions about how to address Harry and Meghan. Ma'am, sir. The same titles used for working members of the royal family at an event run by people who are not in the royal household in Canada for a games that Harry has consistently described as independent from the institution he left. Now, 2 things about this are worth noting. Bauer does not produce the instruction in writing, it comes from sources, and the use of formal address at formal events is not unusual even for people who no longer hold official positions. Many people in public life are addressed formally at the events they chair. But in the context of a couple who left the royal family specifically to escape what they described as the constraining formality of the institution, and who then reportedly required the same formal address at their own independent events, the detail is pointed in a way that is hard to dismiss. Truth number 2. Sentebale, the charity Harry founded for Diana, and what Bauer says corporate donors were told directly. We have covered Sentebale in detail on this channel before, but Bauer's account in Betrayal adds specific details that deserve to be fully understood. Harry founded Sentebale in 2006 to support children affected by HIV and AIDS in Lesotho. The charity is named partly for Diana's nickname, Forget-Me-Not in Sesotho. It was his, something he built from his own grief and his own drive to do something meaningful with his position. By 2023, according to Bauer, something had gone badly wrong. A brand analysis commissioned by the new chair, Sophie Chandauka, found that corporate sponsors were walking away. Audi withdrew, multiple American donors pulled back, and the reason, stated directly in the analysis and reportedly communicated to Harry in person, was the association with his media ventures and with Meghan. The specific language attributed to Chandauka in Harry's presence was this: controversy surrounding Harry's memoir and the public attention around Meghan had discouraged corporate sponsors. Several American donors and companies had withdrawn their support as a result. Harry's response, according to Bauer, was to point to Johnny Depp, to argue that Depp had remained commercially viable despite his very public legal battles and personal controversies. The charity that was supposed to be his mother's legacy being damaged, according to a brand analysis, by the public image of his own wife, and Harry's response was to cite an actor whose reputation itself had become one of the most controversial in Hollywood. By March 2025, Harry, Prince Siso, and the trustees had stepped down from Sentebale entirely. Truth number 1. The thing Bauer says runs through the entire story, and that the wedding was the beginning of.
Bauer's central argument across both of his books about Harry and Meghan, and this is stated most explicitly in Betrayal, is that Meghan is a woman who has consistently reshaped aspects of her past in pursuit of the version of herself she wants the world to see. That the narrative she presents about her childhood, her activism, her relationships, her experience in the royal family is carefully constructed. That the fairy tale of May 19, 2018 was the most elaborate and most public version of a pattern that had been operating for years before Harry ever entered her life. He connects this to her Suits years, accounts of colleagues who experienced a version of Meghan very different from the one the public saw. He connects it to the stories she has told about herself that do not fully match the accounts of people who were present for the same events: the dish soap letter, the secret wedding, the engagement interview she later described as orchestrated and scripted, the Kensington Palace confrontation that nobody on either side has confirmed or denied, the Oprah interview and the years of clarification that followed it. Bauer links this pattern directly to the couple's 2021 interview with Oprah Winfrey, portraying Meghan as pursuing commercial ventures in California while continuing to promote her version of events about her life, which critics have argued diverges from objective facts. International Business Times. That is Bauer's thesis, not that Meghan is entirely wrong about everything, not that the royal family treated her perfectly, not that Harry's grief and his estrangement from his family are fabricated, but that the version of events Meghan presents, the version that was performing itself so beautifully on the steps of Windsor Castle on May 19, 2018, has always been a version, carefully chosen, carefully maintained, and increasingly difficult to sustain against the weight of all the people who have a different account of the same story. Is Bauer right? I genuinely do not know. His methodology, finding the victims, building portraits from the aggrieved, means his account will always skew in a particular direction, and Meghan's defenders are not wrong to point out that a woman who refuses to accept less than she deserves will always generate hostile sources, that the British press has treated her with a hostility that has racial dimensions that deserve to be named, that the institution she joined and then left has its own motivations for supporting an account that places the blame entirely on her. All of that is true, and the 10 things Bauer says are true too, or at least true enough to have been published by one of Britain's most respected broadsheets before the book even came out, which means someone looked at this material and decided it was worth standing behind. The fairy tale was real on May 19, 2018. The 2 billion people who watched it were not watching a performance in the cynical sense. They were watching something that felt genuinely human and genuinely beautiful and genuinely hopeful. But Bauer's argument is that beneath the fairy tale, a different story was already running, and that the last 6 years have been the process of that story making its way to the surface.
Whether that argument is fully right, partially right, or entirely wrong, it is the argument that the most serious royal biographer of his generation has made in print, in a book called Betrayal, named, presumably, for a reason. Drop a comment and tell me which of these 10 truths shocked you most. I want to know. And subscribe if you have not, because the story Bauer has told does not end with the book. It is still unfolding, and I will be covering every chapter of it. See you in the next video.